A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms ends with the smallest finale in Game of Thrones history, which isn't a bad thing, especially since this series is telling a more personal and intimate story. So instead of focusing on a grand and epic spectacle, this episode finds Dunk having an existential crisis of sorts. He feels guilty over Prince Baelor's death, he's wrestling with why the gods would want to keep him alive, and he's questioning the very idea of nobility, to the point where Maekar basically offers him a job, which is something that he would have been extremely excited for in the series premiere. But given his experience throughout this season, Dunk now says that he's done with princes. So he's a bit lost in this episode. He's broken, he's disheartened, and only two things end up changing his mind. The first being a conversation that he has with Lionel Baratheon, because Lionel reveals that he doesn't feel bad about Prince Baelor's death because he believes that Baelor wasn't really risking anything by going into battle with them, which is an ironic statement given that he's the only one of them who actually gave his life. But that's not enough to change Lionel's perspective on the Targaryens as a whole, and he does have a very negative opinion on the Targaryen dynasty. But while Dunk may mostly agree with Lionel here, it's very clear that he recognizes that Baelor was a good man, that he proved it is in fact possible to be a good Targaryen. And this leads us to the second thing that changes Dunk's mind when he has a conversation with Prince Daeron. Because Dunk also believes that Egg is a good Targaryen, but the conversation that he has with Daeron reminds him of the fact that Aegon's upbringing will probably have an influence over the way that he turns out to be. I mean, if Aerion is simply a product of his environment, then it's entirely possible to think that Egg could potentially go on to become a bad Targaryen as well. So, having this revelation, Dunk goes back to Maekar, tells him that he will allow Egg to squire with him, only under the condition that Egg goes along with him on his journeys. That way, he doesn't grow up living lavishly in King's Landing. He'll ideally have more respect for the common folk, having grown up living alongside with them. Unfortunately, Maekar says no, since Egg is his last good son, so Dunk packs up his things and prepares to go, only the gods know where. But before he actually leaves, Raymond returns to gift him back his horse, which is really nice, because even though Dunk tells Raymond that he should keep the horse, I'm just glad that the horse ended up in good hands. Thankfully, the episode does end with Dunk finding some sense of purpose once he is reunited with Egg. Of course, Egg tells Dunk that Maekar ended up changing his mind, so Egg is now officially Dunk's squire, and the two of them set off to journey across the 9 kingdoms. And while that would provide a satisfying ending to their story, it is revealed that Egg was of course lying, and that Maekar did not agree for Egg to go with Dunk. So it'll be really interesting to see what kind of ramifications that decision will have on these two characters, especially since I'm not really clear on if Arlen ever actually knighted Dunk. But I think whether or not Dunk is officially a knight doesn't even really matter. He embodies the true spirit of a good knight, and that's what's most important here, since he'll instill these values into Egg. So, since I found their story in this season to be really endearing, I'm really glad that we'll be seeing them again in a second season, which means that I thought this was a really solid finale. It's definitely not as big and as epic as some of the other Game of Thrones finales, but it perfectly suits the story that was being told here. I mean, introducing jazz in the Game of Thrones universe is a bit weird, but I don't hate it. So while I do personally prefer the grand scale of Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, I'm glad that this series was allowed to try something different. Because while not all of the comedy or newer elements really worked for me, I did happen to enjoy the smaller story being told. Which means that while I may not love it as much as Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms would still definitely get a recommendation from me. But be sure to let me know what you thought of this series, and as always, thanks for watching.